Hey, what's up, guys? So I wanted to make this video to tell you a story of the most packed jail conditions that I've ever been in. The most crowded, overpopulated, and difficult as a result of that conditions that I encountered. The first one that comes to mind is a county jail where I was shoved into a room basically with like probably 70, 80 guys shoved in, and there was literally probably 50 beds available to us all. So they shut you in, the COs lock it and leave, and you're in for the night until the next morning. And obviously there's not enough beds. The beds in this place, something else that was unique about this spot was not only was it overcrowded, as typically can be, but they had triple stacked bunks. I'd never seen that before. It's always just double stacked bunks, and they pack the bunks in, and that's it. But in this case, they were 3 tiers. So you're on that top bunk, and you happen to fall off or get thrown off or whatever the fuck happens, that's a long way down. And not only that, it's a pain in the ass even to climb up there. Some guys have difficulty doing that, especially because climbing up, you're putting your feet on other people's mattress and shit, and that could lead into fights by itself, just trying to get to your bunk. But aside from that, there was such a shortage of bed space that people were sleeping on the floors, people were sleeping underneath the bunks, people were sleeping on the ground next to the fucking urinals in the bathroom, and people were sleeping on tables, under those tables. It was packed. And basically, in that environment, there are no assigned beds, which is also unusual. Typically, you get put in a cell or a unit, and there's a spot for you. In this case, it's completely survival of the fittest, and you just fight. So if you can't fight well enough to earn a bunk, you end up getting your ass kicked and sleeping on the ground. Another bad thing about that spot was that when shit did go down, and it went down all the time, there's always fights. Somebody would get really hurt, and they would be left in a puddle of blood on the ground until the morning, until the COs came in. They wouldn't even fucking care. So they would let us just fight and go to war in there, and they would never come in unless it was a death. Some crazy shit. So that was the one spot that I could think of that really sucked because of the overcrowding. The other spot was not as bad because even though we were actually in tighter conditions, at least, for other people who couldn't get a bunk, there was enough assigned bed space for everybody there. So this is a different county jail. And in this case, it was the first and only time that I'd seen tiny little cells that have up to 6 beds in them. So I didn't have one that had 6 bunks, but I was in one that had 4 bunks. The crazy thing about this was smaller than a regular cell, smaller than a solitary confinement cell usually is, and smaller than a usual double man cell is. It was fucking packed. So you walk in and you literally have a tiny little amount of space with the toilet right here, where there's a bed here, bed on top. You walk in maybe 3 feet, and there's a bed crisscrossing where they overlap over the other ones on the corners. They adjoin. So you have one bed like this with a double stack, one bed like this with another double stack, and this tiny little space for you to all jump down, climb up, and be on the toilet right there. So for the guy who has this bunk on the bottom here, sleeping here with his head here, he's fucking literally maybe 8 inches from the toilet. So just imagine how packed it was. It was so packed that only one of us can get up from our bunk at a time. And the crazy thing about that jail was that was the only jail that I knew of left that's still allowed for smoking. So not only are we jam-packed in this cell, but this little fucking cell is full of smoke. Literally a fucking constant cloud of smoke because you're allowed to, and you don't have to worry about the guards flipping out and catching you. So it was really fucking, luckily I didn't have to stay there that long. I was in and out probably a month, whatever, but it was really tight. So something people don't often even think about when it comes to jail conditions and what you have to deal with if you end up going down. You don't even think about this, but there are times where you literally don't have a bed available to you. There is nowhere for you to lay your head, and you got to fight just to have that. So it's crazy. A lot of people think that jail is like a fucking country club, and you go there and you get the 3 hots and the cots. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's much, much different than that and much more complex, and you got to fight just to be able to exist and survive and endure and continue on in your life, you gotta fight for the most basic of things, and in these cases, just for a fucking bed, for a bunk. So I thought this would be interesting to you guys. I'm sure a lot of you have not been through the things I've been through, so I like to share them for that reason. Hopefully you get something good out of it. Thanks.